Hey, everybody, this is Wayman Daniels, your host of Level Up. Welcome to the show. Today's topic is interracial relationships, that is, interracial relationships. My special guest is Sam Zarconi. Sam, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing very well. How are you? So let me tell you a little bit
I'm
about my
doing marvelous. Mhm.
yeah, no, I just wanted to, tell you a little bit about myself. Um I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I live here in Rochester. I've been living here in Rochester for 17 years. I am married to a beautiful black woman for over 19 years. I have 5 children, 2 grandchildren. Um, as you can see in the background, I'm out in my garage. It's part of maybe a history because I'm by trade, I'm a mechanic, I'm a welder, but currently I work for FedEx. I'm a
Mhm.
delivery driver for FedEx. And more importantly than all of that, I'm a man of God and a child of God. I'm saved, sanctified, Holy Ghost filled, and everything I do and everything I say, God gets the glory, even when persecution comes back from it. Yes,
Hmm.
sir.
So, Sam, you said you have been married for 19 years.
Yes.
19 years, and our topic is interracial relationships, right?
Yes, sir.
Man, so we're going to dig into this conversation and we're just going to let people know what it's like to be in an interracial relationship, the pros and cons of being in it. Now, because you got some good sides and some bad sides.
Of
So,
course.
how did racial discrimination affect you and your wife? Because 20 years ago, it couldn't have been easy going home or in your neighborhood or even let your friends know that you were interested in a black woman. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So I met her in church. That's where I met her. And
Hmm.
um, I remember I let people know because, I'm transparent. I was
Hmm.
married one time before to a white woman.
Okay.
Okay. And that marriage was lasted 4 years and ended in divorce. And then I was single for a couple years. I met my current wife in church. And if I remember the first time I saw her, I was just like, wow. I mean, that just like, I was like, I ain't never in my life seen, such a beautiful woman. And,
Right.
let people know she is 10 years younger than me. But the thing that people
Mm-hmm.
should know is that I didn't just go after her for the physical beauty. Yeah, that was a plus. But during the time when I was single after my divorce, I actually was praying to God for certain qualities I was looking for in my next relationship. And so when I finally had the nerve to ask her out, because I was, I was like, she ain't gonna say,
Mm-hmm.
but she did. And when we went out and we began to talk, and I seen how mature she was and how grounded she
Mm-hmm.
was, and her demeanor, it was everything that I prayed was coming out before me, and it was just
Mm-hmm.
like, wow. So I knew. But I remember uh going to my parents' house. At the time my dad was still with us,
Mm-hmm.
and I had told my parents, I
Okay.
said, I just want to let you know that I have a girlfriend. I said, and she's in my
Mm-hmm.
church and she's black. And then, and they're like, oh, okay, okay. And I told them, I
Okay.
said, I'm not, I didn't come here to ask for your approval. I'm just letting you know that, I said, before you jump to conclusions or whatever, I said, wait till you meet her. I said, she's intelligent, she's
Right.
sweet, she's absolutely drop dead gorgeous. And so, my family to my family like accepted her to this day. They've accepted her and loved her, especially my
Mm-hmm.
sisters and my brothers and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from her side of the family, maybe they might have been a
Mm-hmm.
couple members might have been a little bit like, wait, what are you doing? And I think
Right.
the
Right.
age gap came in too. At the time she was
Mm-hmm.
I was
Right.
30 and she was 20.
Mm-hmm.
And but
Right. Right.
Yeah, it was just the chemistry was there right from the get go, and it was crazy because
Right.
when I was praying to God for, to send me a real woman and send me a real wife I
Mm-hmm.
told her the other day. I said, "Yeah, I wasn't thinking about you, but God knows
Right,
before
right,
we do." And so, yeah,
right, right.
we got married. We dated, for a little bit, and we got married in January 19th,
Mm-hmm.
2003. And here we
Wow.
are, 19 years and some change later, and we're still married. And the relationship has gotten more
19.
mature
Mm-hmm.
and more so, yeah.
More.
And it's awesome. Yeah, it's like any other
So,
relationship. It has its ups and downs, but um,
right.
so yeah,
So
yeah.
19 years later, 5 children. So, Sam, here's a question because a lot of people believe that if they marry someone of a different ethnicity,
Mm-hmm.
not just black and white, but different ethnicities, they believe that they can help resolve racism. But that's not the case because what happens is, in most cases, it brings out more racism be shown in the community and with different people. It doesn't
Right.
curtail it, it just makes it more open. How did you deal with that?
So what I know from my perspective that it's not like you said, it probably would like elevate racism, and at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
um, being in an interracial relationship and other people's, whatever, it's a condition of their heart. Because at the end of the day, the Bible talks about
Mm-hmm.
out of the mouth comes the overflow of the heart. And so I think that we live in a
Mm-hmm.
society where, I mean, the enemy has conditioned society and media, whatever, for the spirit of division. I mean, and I think it's just
Mm-hmm.
absolutely crazy. And I know we're not going, unless you start asking, and I know like going down on like a political road, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are some legitimate reasons why certain cultures, should, have experienced certain things, but um, I think that when if you see like a white man with a black woman, it can be like oh, what's she doing with him? I'm brother's not good enough. Or
Right,
if you
right.
see a black man with a white woman, it's like oh, what a sisters aren't good enough. Was that your trophy wife? And these are things that I mean,
Mm-hmm.
God hasn't put in place, but these are things that society has put
Mm-hmm.
into place to keep the division going, to keep, people, I mean, just divided. Because
Mm-hmm.
think about how powerful we would can be,
Mm-hmm.
if we were all able to come together. And that's the thing is, my wife and I, from day one, our relationship has been rooted in God. Our day, I mean, that was the
Mm-hmm.
common ground, I mean, because
Right.
you can build the biggest skyscraper in the world, but if the foundation's weak, that thing's gonna crumble. So, when we got together
Mm-hmm.
right off the bat, we laid down the foundation that God and Christ is our foundation, and it didn't really matter
Mm-hmm.
other people's opinions because at the end of the day, we're the ones in this relationship. We're the ones that are working on it. You
Right.
know what I mean? And I think for me, it was just I mean, it's kind of it's very exciting. But as
Mm-hmm.
far as like you said, the racism, I do agree that it's not seeing a biracial couple together. You're going to have people
Mm-hmm.
that were raised a certain way to have a certain mindset, and they're going to be like, oh, disgusting, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
case may be. But you would have to examine that person's life and examine their character. So, um,
Right.
to answer your question, we never really face to our face, have in the almost
Mm-hmm.
21 years, because we've been together for over 21 years, but married 19.
Okay.
Never really had a confrontation, as far as, someone, coming up to him saying us and saying, I don't agree with you two being together. I do think though we have gotten some looks. I can think of a couple of times, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, people haven't said anything. So I thank God, for
Right.
that because I try to be I'm a
Mm-hmm.
non-confrontational person.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
I
Sam,
hope.
let's go back just a little bit because you stated that you told your parents that you were starting to date someone and it was a black woman. And you said that you stated that your family, your mother and your father, were fine with it. But you also stated that on the other side of the family, some of them were not too happy about your wife, your present wife, your wife now, coming home with an Italian. So how did that make you feel when you saw that or heard that? How did that make you feel?
um, it did, like, it kind of put me in a place of, like, I didn't do nothing to you, you know what I mean? I'm treating your daughter, with respect, and you know what I mean. I was just like, you really don't, you know what I mean? You don't know me. This is just your perspective. I don't know, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes parents will have their own perspective of what their children, who they should be with, and what they should be doing, and stuff like that. So I just,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, took it on the chin. It wasn't like so much directly to
Mm-hmm.
my face, but you can pick up
Right.
on it. So I, just took it on the chin,
Mm-hmm.
and kept it moving, because at the end of the day, you know what I mean, my wife wasn't saying them things, you know what I mean? She was showing me that she loved me. She
Right.
was showing me that she was interested in me.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew that once we were together, it was going to be an unbreakable bond. And that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, those things were going to, come up eventually. And I was just like, well,
Mm-hmm.
I'll try to handle it with the most class and calmness that
Mm-hmm.
I can, you know what I mean?
Right.
um, as long as I'm not being disrespected, I show people
Mm-hmm.
respect.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone is disrespectful, then what I mean, then I just tune you out and just dismiss you, because
Right.
at the end of the day, what I mean, you're not gonna win any points arguing with someone that has
Mm-hmm.
what I mean, a wayward thinking, or what I mean, or stiff necked.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was mostly most of them, just accepted me and loved me. And at the time,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was in the church I was in. I was the only white person in the whole church, and them
Okay.
people loved
Okay.
me. They loved me. So
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
never really felt, um, like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? Um, I could think of maybe a couple times when we wanted to go visit our church, want to go visit another church, and you walk in
Mm-hmm.
the church, and I felt like I was walking, and everybody would like look at me. I'm like, yes, I'm a part of this ministry too, But
Right.
but yeah, no, it was something that I just was like, okay, whatever. But you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
That was people's initial reaction back then, and like I said, here we are, 21 years later. It's like those
Mm-hmm.
people have let it go, because you know what I mean. We have withstood the test of time. So
Okay. Now, Sam, I'm taking everything you're saying and I'm doing a little dissecting here
sure.
because you said or you stated that you never had personal experience with racism or what people thought or said about you being in a biracial relationship. But you did state that some people might have been thinking, what's she doing with him? How did he get her? And how
Oh
did
yeah.
she get him? And it's a trophy wife. So where did that thought come from?
Where the thought came from when I said it, you mean?
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah. So
because you would
actually,
never these. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So usually it's always been more of, how did he get someone like her? How did this old white
Mm-hmm.
dude get this gorgeous, young black woman? You know what I mean? And to answer that real quick, it was because she saw my heart and she saw the God in me, and that's what she
Mm-hmm.
was looking for. And it didn't matter to her, you know what I mean, but I do remember there was a time when my ex-wife's grandmother had passed away, and
Mm-hmm.
her and I was close to her, and my ex-father-in-law had told me, that she passed away, and where the funeral was going to be, and I can, if I wanted to come, and I was more than welcome. So I went to the wake. It was Shamika and I went to the wake.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she didn't know anybody. I had introduced her to, my ex-in-laws. We stayed there for about 15 minutes. I paid my respects. I left. So
Mm-hmm.
then the next day, um, my ex brother-in-law, he came by my job. This is when we were living in Buffalo, and he came by my job, and he
Mm-hmm.
was like, I just want to say thank you for coming, pay your respects to me, because me and him and his sister went through kind of
Mm-hmm.
like it was a nasty divorce. And he was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, he's like, my dad was like, did you ever meet Sam's wife before? And he was like, yeah, I met her one time before. He's like, oh my gosh, he's freaking beautiful. How did he get someone like that? I didn't know how to take. I was like, how did he get
Right,
someone like that?
right.
You mean how
Right,
did he
right.
how did he upgrade 1,000,000 miles from your daughter? Well, I mean, that's the hand of God. I mean, this is what happens
Yeah.
when you know what I mean, when you step away from the
Right.
world and you get into God. And what I mean, and I've even within my own family had a
Mm-hmm.
statement was made of like how do you get someone like you, how did my brother get someone like you that's
Mm-hmm.
the wife that you are, you're beautiful, you're intelligent, you're faithful, I mean,
Right.
you love him, he's got what all all the stuff like that. But people don't realize, or people
Mm-hmm.
don't think, they think I just walked in, oh, let's get together. The things that I went through to
Right.
get to where I am today,
Right.
what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
divorce, broken heart, foreclosure,
Right.
bankruptcy, driving back and forth from Buffalo to Rochester every Sunday for church for 6 years, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, unsure about what I'm doing, no money, all this stuff. And if I didn't do them things, I would have never have met her. But see, this was all in God's plan to keep pushing me. So I had to step outside of
Mm-hmm.
my comfort zone. So there were things that I went
Right.
through in my own personal life to get to where I am today. But to answer your question, because I feel like I'm going off script, yeah. So those things actually, how did I mean, how did he get someone like her? I was like, what I wasn't supposed to get her. It was funny because I'll just tell you something real quick, real funny. I remember
Mm-hmm.
my
Okay.
oldest daughter, Justice, her biological father, God rest his soul, he was
Mm-hmm.
a DeKalb County police officer. He passed away in the line of duty back in 2008. But at one
Mm-hmm.
time, before he passed, it was me, my wife Shamika, and his name was Rick. We were with him, and we were out to eat, whatever. And I was saying about talking about Tyra Banks. I'm like, yeah, I would Tyra Banks, and then my wife had made a comment. She's like, Sam wishes he can pull Tyra Banks, and he said to her, well, he pulled you,
Right.
so
Right.
why couldn't he pull Tyra Banks? You know what I mean? So um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even in joking though, but those comments were there and have been there, and I mean, I just let it roll
Right.
off my
Right.
shoulder. I even had a kind. You can interrupt me anytime you need to. Okay, I even had a one
Mm-hmm.
time
Okay.
I was having I had this one girl on Facebook. She ended up unfriending me because she had posted something on Facebook, and I said I don't agree with
Mm-hmm.
that. Real nicely. I don't never argue with people on Facebook because what I mean, I'm and so then she started going back and forth with me, and then she commented, she's like, what you think because you got that black woman on your arm you can say whatever you want about certain situations? I was like, what does my wife being a black woman have to do with
Right.
me
Right. Right. Right.
putting my input
Mm-hmm.
on a social media site? And then she ended up unfriending me. So yeah, I mean, those
Right.
things, they are real, but you got to know who
Right.
you are.
So.
You got to know who you are and whose you
Right.
are. You know what I mean? So my
Mm-hmm.
relationship with my wife, and my children, it's not subjected to other people's opinions and what I mean, other people's
Mm-hmm.
approval. You know what I mean? If you with me and you accept it, cool. If you have a heart issue
Mm-hmm.
and you're having trouble with it, what I mean, go see God. You don't want to see God, then what I
Right.
mean, then I can't really help you then, because I'm not going to change. Only God can change the heart. So.
Right. So Sam, it sounds like to me that sometimes you ignore these things,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you just brush them off, and then
Yeah.
other times you confront the situation. Which one works best for you, or does all three of them work according to whatever the circumstances may be?
Exactly. You took the yeah. It would depend on the nature of the circumstance. If it's just I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if it's a sly or slick comment, I look at
Mm-hmm.
and if it's somebody that I know I've been around, then I look at the content of that person's character and be like, I'm not surprised.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If it's if it was ever a situation out in public and it got you know to a level that I've never
Mm-hmm.
experienced in as as the husband and the man, I mean, I would have to stand up and confront it. Um, if it was a male, if it was a female, then I would be like, okay, whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
I can remember. to, a time. There's a place on Exchange Boulevard. Yeah, Exchange
Mm-hmm.
Boulevard. It used to be called Nathaniel's. I don't know what it's called now, but we used to go over there to watch the UFC fights. And the one night, we walked in, and we used to meet her father out there and her brother, and we watched the pay per view. And I walked in, and my wife was all dressed up and stuff, and we're walking. She had her arm around my
Mm-hmm.
arm, and there were about 4 or 5, um, actually they were good looking, guys, black guys at the bar. And I was walking
Mm-hmm.
by, they were like making this
Mm-hmm.
face like, are you serious? Like,
Right.
what's she doing with him? And I
Mm-hmm.
seen it, but I just kept on
Right. Right.
walking. And I'm just like,
Right. Right.
okay. And I'm saying because that's just the outward perspective, but people don't know
Right.
what brought us together, what we had to do to, do to stay together, and
Mm-hmm.
how our personalities match, and how the respect that we
Mm-hmm.
have for one another. It's not always just about,
Right.
well, why are you dating outside your race, or why are you doing stuff like that? I've
Mm-hmm.
never had to deal with something like it. If I was watching a TV show, one time I was watching a Tyra Banks show. That's my girl,
Mm-hmm.
Tyra Banks, and she had a show, and it was about interracial relationships, and
Mm-hmm.
it was they had a couple there. He was a black guy, and he had a white girl friend, and I think his girlfriend. And he said they were walking through the airport, and some black girls walked by, and she said, "You dropped something," and he turned around and was looking. So he thought he dropped his wallet, and she's like, "No, I'm talking about your color." And he was like,
Right.
"Really?" And they're
Hey,
like,
hey, Sam.
"Yeah,
I got this woman on here. She
okay."
put a comment up here. Do you see that comment?
Uh,
That last one.
I don't see no comment. What is it? Everyone can see
Oh,
and hear you.
okay, this last one. Do you know somebody by the name of Shamika Zarcone?
Uh,
I'm gonna
yeah,
tell
I
you
think
what she. I'm gonna tell you
yeah,
what she's.
yeah.
I'm gonna tell
I,
you what
I,
she said.
I used to go to church with
Uh,
her. We used to be in the
oh,
same
you
church
did.
together. Yeah,
Well, she said this, and I quote, that love and respect is what has kept us 20 years. That's a bad woman there, man. She watching you, your thing on level up. But Sam,
yeah.
I got another comment on here from a friend of mine named Benicia
Okay,
Wyatt. And she says, love shouldn't have a color, right? Well, let's talk about
exactly.
this because I was talking to someone the other day. I put up a post on Facebook talking about macaroni and cheese. You got
Hmm.
white cheese, you got yellow cheese,
I
right?
think I remember that. Yeah.
And I was told, yeah, and I was told cheese is cheese. And then I put, so when they look at you, remember that it was a metaphor stating that we all are human beings, no matter what color we are. And that's so important that people understand that it's not about race, it's not about color, it's about being human, and you fall in love with who you fall in love with. So now let's get back to what we were talking about because now, when you and Shamika met 21 years ago,
Uh
did you
huh.
guys ever sit down and talk about, because at 20 years ago, when you get married, I don't care who it is, two value systems. Did y'all discuss the value systems and the differences in the value systems, and how did you get over the differences in your value system?
No, honestly, well, I want before I comment on that, I'm gonna go back to the comments that they made about what was the one that
Mm-hmm.
the other woman made. What did it say?
Oh,
What was the other?
oh, Benicia Wyatt said love shouldn't have a color.
That's right. And
And
if you
then,
remember
mm-hmm,
a little back in our conversation, I said we laid the foundation down. What I mean, as far as our
mm-hmm,
relationship, being in God. What I mean, and God is love, and so that means, what I mean,
mm-hmm,
sometimes I mean, mostly we try to in the spirit, and what I mean, in the spirit of
mm-hmm,
God, and there are no colors, there are no genders. The spirit is just the love
right,
of God. What I mean, so that's how
mm-hmm.
that ties in there. But to answer your question, no, we didn't sit down and we didn't talk about. We didn't. It was. Honestly, this is I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we just got into the relationship, and then we were enjoying each other,
Right.
our company, and we were just maybe
Mm-hmm.
the excitement of I mean, her being black, and the excitement for her maybe of me being like an older white guy. What I mean, and just like I said, the
Mm-hmm.
connection that we had, and it just like right off the bat. we just knew that we were going to be together. We did hit a couple bumps in the road. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we did, and had we one of our sons we had before we got married, and that kind of caused a conflict. But I mean, the
Right.
sometimes we are human, and we do have a sin nature, and so I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
did, I mean, fall for a time there, and sin does have
Mm-hmm.
consequences. And so there was
Right.
a
Right.
time where we went through a patch where it was like, I mean, I thought, when she was pregnant with our first son, that we weren't going to be together, but we served such a
Mm-hmm.
merciful God, and a graceful God. Then we got through that, but you learn from that, and and the relationship grows
Mm-hmm.
and you become more mature. But no,
Mm-hmm.
then after that we got married, and then we had another child by the end, before
Mm-hmm.
we hit our 1 year anniversary, and then a couple more
Mm-hmm.
after that. It was just kind of like, all of a sudden, it's like we kind of like went from this routine, you fall into when you start having children. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
there was, I mean, probably times where, like, in our marriage and our relationship, where it's like, kind of like, all of a sudden you become like two roommates, just like, and you're like, wait, hold
Yeah.
on a second. You know what I mean? All of the
Mm-hmm.
high and the rush from the beginning, it's now you got all this
Right.
responsibility, and financial responsibility. So we had, what I mean, and you
Mm-hmm.
got to have a real strong content of character, and you really have to
Right.
have a sense of faithfulness, to see these things through. And,
Mm-hmm.
what I mean, and that's the testimony as to why I can sit here and say, 19, 21 years, 19 years of marriage, we're still together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but, I mean, we never, I would think, I mean, like I said, and this is a tell all podcast. Honestly, I
Mm-hmm.
think that it wasn't until probably around, we've never really honestly discussed about, hey,
Mm-hmm.
now we are starting to discuss, like, say, hey, you know what, maybe in the next year, let's move to North Carolina. We sell the house, we do
Mm-hmm.
this, we go down there and do that, whatever the case may be. And she's
Mm-hmm.
more open to me. Not that I'm not open to it, I'm just old fashioned, I'm
Right.
rooted.
Right.
Even though I have this
Mm-hmm.
job that's physically beating me to a pulp, you know what I mean?
Right.
But um, it was just kind of like, we never really sat down and discussed, well, this is what I mean. We have, but not me. It wasn't until probably, honestly, till maybe the 2016
Mm-hmm.
election rolled around, when we started to realize, maybe we
Right.
had certain different political views. But even in that,
Mm-hmm.
we should respect for one another, because at the end of the day,
Right. Right.
even, I mean, people are so divided, like, I mean, what's going on as far as that. But
Mm-hmm.
even in that, we understand that God is in control of everything, and
Mm-hmm.
despite certain
Right.
reasonings we might have, you know what I mean, but there's always, like she said, like she commented, there's always been the love, there's always been the respect. If she said, I mean, this is what
Mm-hmm.
I think about this, as far, I'll be like, okay, even if I don't agree, okay, because I'm not about, at
Right.
the end of the
Right.
day, as the husband, you set the tone for your house.
Right.
I'm not about to, what I mean,
Right.
what I mean, what am I going to do? End 21 years of marriage because we have a different political view? No, that's, let the world worry about that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
we keep our eyes on
Right.
God. So the answer to your question is like, no, I don't think we really sat down, and we just kind of like went with the flow and took on anything that came against us.
Right.
I will say one thing. I don't know if this had anything to do with it, but it was funny because your wife, Lashonda, my sister, she did not believe that my wife and I were
Mm-hmm.
married when she first met us. Do you remember?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A woman named Yokita? Yokita? She used to be in the church, and Yokita had mentioned to her that we were married. She's like, they are not married,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was just
Right.
from the
Right. Right. Right.
perspective, what I mean, and I mean, your wife,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's a mirror image of my wife. I mean, the heart, the class, all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. I just think that she thought it
Mm-hmm.
was like perspective of like, well, you're gonna tell
Mm-hmm.
me that she's with that older white? No, they're not married. So it came from
Right.
all
Right.
different
Right.
perspectives, whether it was funny and respectful to people with sly remarks, outside of family, to certain looks. But yeah, as far as but anything major, I just thank God that you know
Mm-hmm.
one day He may show me, I shielded you from this and this and this. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I don't even know if maybe my own family members, and I'm sure they have, behind my back, but there's nothing I can do about it. That's their opinion. They're entitled
Mm-hmm.
to it. Because it anything that was, could have been, it hasn't stopped us from,
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling
Okay.
our vow and our covenant with God.
Mm-hmm. Now, Sam, I noticed that you mentioned God a lot in this relationship, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that Christ is the foundation. Christ is
Yes.
the foundation, but it sounds like you had to have faith, not only faith, but you had to put forth some work with that faith to have a relationship with your current wife for 25 years
21.
because you believe, from what I'm gathering from what you're saying, is that you realize even though I have faith, I still got to work on me in order to have a healthy relationship with this woman who is my wife. So tell us
Definitely.
about that work process. You expected me to have to do a lot of dying to Sam Zarconi in order to have a successful relationship with your wife.
Yeah. So I think that I would say that honestly, like to where we are today, I would give her
Mm-hmm.
more credit in the past than I would ever give me, because there was a time,
Mm-hmm.
if it wasn't for her taking a stand in God and her absorbing,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe, and sometimes abuse can be silent treatment, sly
Right.
remarks. I just, let me put it out there. In the 21 years together, I have never ever put my hands on her. I never will. But
Mm-hmm.
it could
Right.
be the silent treatment of, it could be,
Mm-hmm.
frustrated about, maybe my perception of thinking certain things. And so if it was, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
if it wasn't for the God in her, if it wasn't for her, because if this was just a worldly relationship, you and I wouldn't be having this
Mm-hmm.
conversation right now, and this marriage probably would have been over a long time ago. But so yeah, so
Right.
it wasn't. So even though she's 10 years younger than me, she's 10 years more mature than me in her nature and her
Mm-hmm.
character. And so
Mm-hmm.
if it, so yeah, I really had to, they said the faith without works is dead. You have to put in the work. It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's, oh, I want to buy this car. I believe by faith that God's going to just
Mm-hmm.
give me this car. No, you got to put the work in, go down to the bank, get pre-approved and all that stuff
Right.
like that.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, I really had to mature in myself and realize, like, wait a second, you only get one shot at this, and you don't know
Mm-hmm.
what you have until it's gone. And
Right.
sometimes
Right.
you just be like, wait, I didn't need to change certain things in my character, and I need to change certain
Mm-hmm.
things within my heart, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
because um, if you're not, standing on the word of God in relation to your spouse, sometimes too that spirits in a home and it trickles down to your children. You start seeing the effect, and then you
Right.
realize that you have really certain things have entered in your home through through the
Mm-hmm.
man. Because man answers to God and a woman answers to man.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they say. But I've never put my wife in a position where like um I expect you to do this, and I want this when I get home. Now we're in a place now
Mm-hmm.
because of our work schedule. If you can do it, cool. If you can't, we'll figure it out. But yeah, to answer your question,
Mm-hmm.
definitely, it took, reading the Word of God, listening to the Word of God,
Right.
certain spiritual influences that had over my life that taught me,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, how to be a husband, how to be a father, and I'm by no means perfect. I am by no
Right.
means perfect, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, definitely, without God, this would not have the testimony of 21 years of being together. I hope I answered your question.
Well, it sounds like to me. I gotta go with the Bible. Can I go to the Bible?
Yep, yep, you sure can.
It sounds like to me you and Shamika both had to put on the whole armor of God in order to not allow other people's opinions about biracial relationships affect you. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And I think the whole time, like we were talking, it might have been, because me being the
Mm-hmm.
guest and folk, but there's things that she's had to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was within her family, or maybe outside, you know, I mean, of things that she might have done, why you with him and stuff that was, whatever the case may be. But like I said
Mm-hmm.
again, that would go back to, and because I will not ever take advice from someone that's not married. If you ain't been married or you've been married and you got divorced,
Right.
there's nothing you're gonna tell me about keeping my marriage together. If you operating in a
Yes.
successful marriage and that marriage is rooted in God, then yes, I'm open to what you're saying. But if you ain't operating in a marriage covenant, now it's one thing if you were like in a marriage covenant, and you were in God and one of the spouses passed away, but I know your character, I know your walk with God, then
Mm-hmm.
yes, I'll live with you. But you
Right.
just somebody that just, I mean, I don't see that integrity in you, then you ain't got, I don't have
Yes.
nothing to say. But yeah, definitely we had to put on the full armor of
Uh-huh.
God because, like I said, with the fiery darts, and I mean, sometimes those fiery darts are people's tongues, people's perceptions,
Right.
I
Right.
mean, because at the end of the day, people sometimes you know what? You might see this white man and black woman together, and it could be,
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with that. No, it could be in fact to me, you're just hater. You're hating. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Right.
How did you listen? I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm blessed. Okay, we're blessed,
Right. Right.
and that comes
Mm-hmm.
with persecution because it wasn't too
Right.
long ago. I had told someone that I'm blessed because I pray every day, and this person told me they would slap me
Mm-hmm.
across my face. I said okay, and I just hung up the phone.
I don't blame you. I'd have hung up too. Hey Sam,
Yes.
I don't know, man. I got another comment on my
Uh,
wall over here,
Okay.
and it's from can you see any comments? You can't see
No,
no comments.
I don't see no comments because I'm on.
Well,
I
I'm
mean,
gonna read this.
okay.
I want you when you get off this live podcast. I
Yes.
need you to go to Wegmans and get some flowers because your wife deserves some flowers. You want me to tell you what she just said?
What she say?
Your wife said we both have done a lot of maturing, growing
Yeah.
throughout the course of life or relationship. It wasn't
Yep.
always easy to do, but the fruit that was bared has been such a blessing to each of us. Man, your wife got
Wow.
your back, man. You make sure you get them flowers, man. All
Yeah.
right.
Okay, yeah. I will. I will definitely.
Hey,
Definitely.
yeah, because we're talking about the value system and how you guys worked out the differences between the value systems. Now, what happens when you both have different interests? How did you work that into the relationship? Excuse me. And how did you work it out to be successful with the different interests that you each might have?
When you say different interests, what are you referring to? Just like life in
Well,
general?
yeah, life in general. Let's say she like baseball, you like golf. She likes family outings, you don't. Things like
Right.
that. She likes going to the museum, you like sitting on the couch. How do you work those things out as a couple? Now we're not talking biracial. We're just talking about a relationship in general.
Right. Right. So everything has a balance. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It was funny because I since I was a little kid, I would watch professional wrestling, right?
Hey
You know
Sam,
what I
hold on,
mean?
hold on, hold on, Sam, hold on. I got a comment. I couldn't do nothing but smile. Your wife said she just dragged you along, man.
She just dragged me along. Yeah, that shows you how strong she is to be able to drag this weight. Um,
Oh
I
man, Shamika, stop
so I
it.
remember
Go ahead,
like yeah,
Sam. Mm.
when I've been I used to watch, but I don't anymore. Maybe once in a while if I can catch it, just for just maybe to unwind. But I was like big time into the World Wrestling Federation, whatever. And so when I was married to my
Mhm.
first wife, now mind you, I was in my early 20s. I would come home and watch
Right,
it on
right.
Monday night. She's like, "This is stupid. I don't know why you watch it." And she
Uh-huh.
would just go in the room and close the door, and I'd be like, "Okay, whatever." But then when we
Right.
started dating, she was
Uh-huh.
like, I love professional wrestling. I'd be like, she goes, yeah, I'll go with you downtown to watch it. And I was like, oh, yeah, she's the
Right.
one. You know what I mean? And so, we met that. And then, we got into watching the UFC, and she's into it just as much
Yes.
as I am.
Yes.
But as far as,
Yes.
their different interests, I guess, sometimes, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if it's something that I'll be like, I don't really want to do that. I don't feel like she'll be like, okay, and she'll go
Right.
do it herself and take the kids. It
Uh-huh.
doesn't stop her from enjoying her life. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
stop her. And sometimes, like she said, I'll go along, for the support, or she'll come along for
Right.
the support. And sometimes that could be
Right.
being around family too. You know what I mean? So
Right.
um,
Right.
you have to, what I mean, when she talks about the maturity, we have to talk about from the
Mm-hmm.
perspective of marriage ain't always, because there was a long time where it was like always made about me, what I'm feeling, what I'm going through, and
Right.
it's like
Right.
no,
Right.
there's two people in this thing. The Bible talks about the two become one flesh.
One. Right.
The
Right.
Bible
Right.
talks about the two become one flesh. The Bible doesn't talk about, well, you get white and black and mix it together. It don't work. Like I said, that's the
Right.
world's
Right.
perception. You know what I mean? Like I said, there's a
Right.
lot of haters out there. But
Mm-hmm.
like I said, and if it's something I want to do and she's not interested, I'll be like, okay, I'll go do it, but
Right.
she's,
Right.
about 99.99% supportive, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as us having different interests, there has to be a balance, and that comes with the maturity in the
Yeah.
relationship, and that comes through trials and tribulations. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And love, because love is an action, it's not a
Mm-hmm.
feeling, you know what I mean? And it's
Right.
hard to sidestep your feelings, but you know what I mean? If you have a
Right.
godly mind and you know the word of God, then you know to combat against, all these things that we've talked about today. You know what I mean? Because you have,
Well, Sam, it sounds like to me, yeah, it sounds like to me what you're doing is taking your common interests and using the common interest to build a healthy relationship. But also, you said that sometimes you would go for support.
yeah,
Man, it sounds like you're a great husband, man. You're a great husband because a
uh,
lot of people don't support each other. One
right.
might say, I want to do this, one might say, I want to do that, and they work in separatism instead of working
Hmm.
as a unit. And it
Right.
sounds and it's powerful what you said. I use that word powerful because it is powerful that you guys are working as a unit. And that's so
Yeah.
important because you stated that the two become one. And
Hmm.
the objective for each person is to be happy in a relationship, marriage, for the glory and honor of God. And that sounds like you and Shamika. If I'm wrong, just let me know.
No, you're not wrong, because at the end of the day, people
Mm-hmm.
need to know that the whole purpose behind a marriage is to have
Mm-hmm.
it's a ministry. You know what I mean? I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
as two people will meet, they'll fall in love, you know what I mean? And 8 months later, they have a $30,000 wedding. And then
Mm-hmm.
when they wake up the next morning, just the very act of marriage will change a person. And they
Mm-hmm.
realize, I didn't know this person.
Right.
Then, a few years down the road, they filing for divorce, and the divorce, and even within the
Mm-hmm.
church, the divorce rate is like 50%. So, I mean, the enemy
Right.
is really wreaking havoc. And I can
Mm-hmm.
really, it's a testimony unto the power of God, because
Mm-hmm.
statistically, the first marriage is 50% divorce. Second marriage, I think, is like
Right.
67. I think third marriage is like 73%. So I'm on my second marriage. So my first
Mm-hmm.
marriage was
Right.
only 4 years and it ended in divorce, because it goes back to what you were saying. There was no support. There was no,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you end up, this
Right.
person did what they wanted. There was, because there was no godly foundation. And so really think about,
Mm-hmm.
so now here I am in my second marriage, which has a 67% statistic of divorce, on top of it being a biracial marriage, on top of, in
Mm-hmm.
2020 going through, all the, the racial tension and all that stuff like that. And like I said, because
Mm-hmm.
where our minds and our perception are in God, you can withstand the test of
Mm-hmm.
time and go through these things. And so, to be in my second marriage, and as now it has lasted 19 years, and it will be till death do us part,
Mm-hmm.
which I hope is a long, long time down the
Right.
road. Um,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Right.
definitely, definitely. So,
Well, well,
um,
well, Sam, can I do this right quick?
sure,
Because I want our viewers to know that the topic was biracial or interracial relationships, right?
right,
But the
yeah,
most important, the most important thing right now was not the topic of biracial or interracial relationship. The most important thing was having a healthy relationship. Because
yes,
when you are healthy, you don't see color, you don't see
yep,
ethnicity. All you see is the human being. And that's what we wanted everyone to see on Level Up today.
that's
When you
right,
came on the show, you thought it was going to be one way, but me and Sam
yeah,
and God already knew that we was going to end it another way.
that's right. And
So, go ahead, Sam.
no, no, I just wanted to say real quick,
Mm-hmm.
the whole 21 years we have been together, like the fact going into a restaurant wherever and I'm white and she's black, it would be we might as well have been the same color because there was never a thought in my
Hmm.
mind, never a thought in her
Right,
mind, and it's just not there. It's not there.
right, right.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, here's something for you. In closing, I want you to. I have closing thoughts as well, but I want you to
Okay.
talk to those. I'm not even going to talk about a biracial relationship, but those that are thinking about getting into a relationship, what would be the key to their success that you can pass on wisdom to give them the things that you think they just suggestions that will help their relationship. uh, just so talk to us on that level, give us some great thoughts.
Okay, sure. So to anyone that's looking to get into a relationship, again, I'm going to stand on the word of God. I'm going to stand
Mm-hmm.
on the foundation of God. Is that to have a that common interest in that person because
Mm-hmm.
you can't if you have one person that's a believer and one that's not. The Bible talks like what fellowship does light have with dark, or or how can fresh
Mm-hmm.
water and salt water flow from the same stream? For those who have an ear to hear, let them hear that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I would recommend, definitely praying together,
Mm-hmm.
talking to each other, talking about like the history of where you come from and being open up front
Mm-hmm.
instead of things popping up, secrets, whatever, and just be honest and open, with each other
Mm-hmm.
and always respect. And, respect and watch your tongue because, in a lot of relationships, wherever there's verbal abuse, physical abuse is not too far behind. So I would
Mm-hmm.
definitely say, anyone who gets into a new relationship, there's that high, there's that rush, there's that physical
Right.
attraction, and that's hard to overcome. But you know what I mean. Sometimes when you put the side of God, you just go through that. That eventually that stuff wears off. So to answer
Mm-hmm.
your question again, I would definitely, to anyone that is a believer, I don't care how attractive the unbeliever is. If they don't have the same belief or reason in you, then you got to know that's what you want. That's not what God has for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because only what you do for God will last. Only what you do for God will
Mm-hmm.
last. So for anyone that might be listening that said, I don't believe in all that, I just believe love is love. That's cool. I respect your opinion. This is just, I'm telling
Mm-hmm.
you what works for me. And what works for me is
Right.
that the Spirit of God and His love and His grace and prayer is undeniable. It's undefeatable. So again, anyone looking to get in a relationship, build it on God because only what you do for
Mm-hmm.
God will last because you will encounter things
Mm-hmm.
that you don't foresee that you're going to need God and you're going to need a God-like reasoning that goes beyond your worldly perception to
Mm-hmm.
get through it. And then there will come another level of maturity and respect along with that.
All right. I got three comments I gotta read
Okay.
because your divine aid or your help me put down here, which is great, great feedback. Be whole and healed before you get into any relationship. That's number
Of
one.
course.
That's so
Yeah.
true.
Yes, it
And
is.
then the second one from your divine aid said, examine the person's actions and not their words with godly standards you already have established for yourself. And finally, your divine aid say, pray, pray, pray for the Spirit to lead and guide you, and don't allow your flesh and your feelings to sit in the driver's seat. Man, she said
Yeah.
a mouthful. You and her together, y'all
Yeah.
dangerous, man. Y'all powerful.
Yeah. And that's what, and that's
Thank you,
what, and
Shamika.
you're right. And,
Mm,
and all joking aside, I'm not, because like I
mm,
said, when you
yeah.
read my comments, my wife's comments, and you think
Mm,
you have the same jewel gem sitting at home.
right,
That's they're
right,
one and the same. And
right,
man, because I think people, and but like I said again, when you in God and you put in God's hands, you have no choice but to be
right.
blessed. You know what I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
maybe my wife should have been on this podcast. No, but you know what I
All
mean.
right. We got less than probably a minute. I have to put this in, and then we're gonna get off because we say
Oh,
now here's a, and she says we're one. Live in a world where everyone can find true love from any race. As you focus on being the best version of yourself. Sam, we're gonna thank you for coming on to the show. All the comments, I thank you for the comments. I'm your host, Wayman Daniels of Level Up. Thank you for coming. Sam, you got to do this with me. Peace.
Peace. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right. All right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for coming on Level Up. Have a great day.
God bless.